Hello, welcome to a special edition of WGU Analytics Fireside Chat Series, Episode 7. The theme of this one is Married to Analytics. My name is Alicia Crowder. I'm a WGU student of the Data Analytics and Data Management Program, Bachelor of Science program, and I'll be your host tonight. At the beginning here, before we begin, I'd like to draw your attention to the lower right-hand corner of your screen where there's the question and answer section. We please do encourage you to ask questions as the session progresses. Also, please check out the College of IT events page soon for the date of the upcoming episode 8, which will be about analytics entrepreneurship. Now, without further ado, we are turning the tables. The interviewer becomes the interviewee. And I'd like to introduce Amanda Dery and Dean Dery. Welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Alicia.
Well, Amanda, if I could start with you, I'm curious to know about your background a little bit. If you could tell us a little bit about yourself, how you started on your data science and analytics journey.
Sure, of course. I got my undergraduate degree in just in business management. And when I went through the courses in there, I really enjoyed a lot of different things. But coming out of that, I didn't know what I wanted to focus on. So I was lucky enough to get a rotational program at EMC in business operations. And so that allowed me to have 3 one-year rotations in different parts of the business, which was an amazing experience because it helped me to see what were the different elements of business that I liked and what I didn't like. And actually, in my second rotation, I was doing pricing, and I saw this tool that one of my team members had created in Visual Basic. And I thought, wow, that is so cool. I want to know how to do that. So I went and took a community college class in Visual Basic. And I started learning about coding. And I was hooked. I wanted to do more. So I took more classes. I took C++. I went on, took some courses in the Stanford online curriculum. And later, I was able to get my third rotation in a data science team at Dell. And so once I was in there doing the work, I just knew that that was what I loved. And so I continued on with that. I was able to go get my master's in business analytics and continue to grow my career at the same time. I later, after graduating, transitioned to a lead data scientist role at Virgin Pulse. And I did that for a few years, really interesting projects in a bit of a different space. And then I moved back to EMC had been acquired by Dell. And so I moved back to Dell in the HR space, doing HR analytics. And after a few years in that, I was able to optimize a lot of what they had available and really automate a lot of things for our HR business partners. And I love that work, and it took me into my current role as a talent product manager. And so right now I'm focused on designing the skills architecture to support our employees and our HR function to support workforce planning efforts.
That's really cool. You know, it's funny because actually my first coding class was Visual Basics at a community college here in Texas. So I was like, oh, wow,
Yeah.
that's pretty neat.
It's a great opportunity. I mean, it's similar to WGU. It's a low cost of entry to test something out, see if you like it, and it stuck with me.
And especially in the past, there were a lot of applications for it, so used so heavily back in those days. Well, Dean Dery, how about you? What drew you into a data analytics and data career path?
Oh boy. Well, first of all, feel free to call me Joe, Alicia, and thank you very much for being with us tonight and turning the tables with us. And thank you to everyone that joined in to hear our stories and our paths and get some tips and tricks. So if I go back to the early to mid 2000s and I'm an undergraduate student, I was majoring in statistics and I was majoring in marketing. And I was at a little bit of a crossroads because I wanted to be able to do both. But the issue was in the early 2000s, analytics and data science, while they existed in some capacities with different names, they weren't really this formalized thing in what we know today, where you walk into a room and say, I'm doing analytics or I'm doing data science, and everyone nods their head. Back in the mid 2000s, nobody really knew what a data scientist was. In fact, it was 2007, I think, when McKinsey published that original article that coined what a data scientist is. And it became that sexiest job of the 21st century. Um, at that point, I had a great advisor in undergrad that had said to me, Joe, why are you trying to pick between these two things? You know, if you love math and you love marketing, why can't you do something that brings them both together? And this professor, Elaine Allen, she then introduced me to some folks at Bentley University at the time who had one of the first master's programs in marketing analytics. And I had a conversation with Paul Berger, who literally wrote the textbook on survey analysis and survey design. And he was a professor emeritus from MIT that had come over to Bentley to start that program. And he introduced me to someone who would soon become my PhD advisor, Dominique Houghton, who was this great PhD statistician who had a phenomenal background, loving data, had a music education, like a music performance background as well. And she recently went back and finished her music degree, which is exciting. But all these folks just had such a passion for using math and using business and bringing those things together to really drive impactful change with data. So I went over to Bentley and I started that master's degree, and I knew as I was starting to get into it that I eventually wanted to get into academia. I loved teaching it. I loved getting on the soapbox. I loved getting people to drink the analytics Kool-Aid and really get excited about what they could do with data and what they could do with math to really solve business problems that other people just couldn't solve, and you couldn't solve with the traditional SWOT analysis or Porter's forces or all these things. So I went to EMC at that point well, I worked for a year in an analytics startup in New Hampshire, and then I went to EMC. And I went in as EMC's first data scientist. In fact, they didn't even have a job title for me at the time. They actually put us in as research scientists because data scientist wasn't even a job title yet. And over time, I realized that I wanted a PhD in the space. I wanted to be able to come back to university at some point to be able to lead an analytics program like the one here at WGU. So the rest is kind of history, and we can get more into that. But for me, it all came from two things that I loved and having some really pivotal conversations with mentors early on in my career and in my educational that journey that really wanted to help me to do what I loved and not have to put one of those two things aside.
I think the mentor program at WGU is something, I mean, well, that's what I've preached to some of my family members who have joined and become WGU students, was that that's such a helpful thing. And so then having a mentor too, you know, obviously that's how I was able to advance in my career long before WGU actually. And it ties back to the Visual Basics thing because he had built a proprietary system using Visual Basics, and that's why I went to the course, and that was my mentor back in those days, which is how I ended up going. So it's really cool to have that. Amanda, did you have a mentor involved in your college education or early career?
I haven't had much of a mentor. I know it's definitely something that I strive for, and I've built relationships with many people along my career journey. Certainly they've helped me out as I've moved along. And I do strive to network as much as I can, as that is so critical in your career. But I think I wasn't as lucky as Joe to have so many mentors in my career journey.
Sounds like you had a few.
Mhm.
Well, speaking of origin stories, do you mind if I ask how the two of you met?
Well, we were lucky enough in Amanda's third rotation that she was rotating on the team where I was that individual contributor data scientist. So working with her on a lot of those projects, helping to introduce the different data sets, introduce our data lake at EMC, we got a chance to work together. And it goes back to a famous Christmas party at this point where we were having our EMC Christmas party and we were going around the table and everyone from the team was there talking about what their weekend plans were going to be. And Amanda is from San Francisco originally and came here for college. So she didn't have a lot of family in this area. And as we're going around, Amanda didn't have plans that weekend. So I had an opportunity to invite her to come along with me to a friend's Christmas party. And the next morning she texted me and said, "When are you picking me up?" And the rest was kind of history for there, but it was that first opportunity
to go outside of work.
Yeah.
Right, that makes sense. So then you have that both that interest too in the how do you find that experience getting to have your mate be someone who also has the deep interest in data analytics and a passion for that transformational process as well of people and affecting change, creating change?
You know, I can start with what it was like before, which you know, if you go back again to those years where analytics and data science was not as well known, trying to explain that on a date at that period in time, I used to basically describe my career as it being a professional Where's Waldo finder. And I found that was probably the easiest way to do it, which in that case, either the date would end at that moment in time or
I was thinking maybe.
But you know, funny enough, my advisor Dominique, she told me very early on, "Joe, you need to marry somebody in analytics," and she told me that over and over again. So the day that we went and told Dominique that we were dating, and Amanda actually went and did the master's program there as well too. Basically, her response was, "I told you so."
It's good though. It's nice because we get to talk about work sometimes, and having worked with a lot of the same people, we know what each other is talking about. We can give each other advice, but at the same time, I think every couple has points where they don't want to talk about work anymore. And so when we're just like every other couple.
We do love data though.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's nice to have that to share.
Mhm.
That kind of ties into my next question. I was wondering, in your industry experience, have you noted any specific list of personality traits or characteristics that people might have who actually thoroughly enjoy data professions and thrive in them?
Mhm. Yeah, for me, I would point to two things. One is just an intellectual curiosity. So it just like the drive to keep digging and trying to figure out why, what's the root cause, like trying to get to the bottom of it, because we definitely solve some very tricky problems that other folks have not been successful at. But the other piece I would say is execution, because I've known some people throughout my career where even though they had that deep intellectual curiosity, if you can't follow through and execute, then that certainly makes you much less successful in this career.
So just building on that too, you can tell successful people by that drive, by that passion. This is not a career path that you go into if you're not a passionate person. You need to fall in love with the problems that you're working on. You need to fall in love with the data. You need to fall in love with the business process. It needs to become a part of who you are. And I can think back to one of the earliest projects that I worked on at EMC, where we were trying to influence renewal sales. So this was an organization that focused on renewal contracts. So think about it back when you used to go to Best Buy and buy a TV, and the guy at the cash register, the girl at the cash register would say, "Would you like a protection plan with that?" Well, at EMC, which if you're not familiar with that company, EMC was a data storage company. So most of the largest companies in the world, all their data storage was provided by EMC. So they would sell data protection plans because if you were a major bank or financial institution and your data center went down, you wanted to know that somebody was coming very, very quickly to fix that. So those maintenance renewal packages were worth millions of dollars and they were margin heavy. So we wanted to build a model to actually prioritize those contracts that were most likely to renew and really focus those renewal sales reps on those customers. But to learn about that, we had to become kind of part of the renewals family. We actually went and learned about creating renewals contracts. We learned about the renewal sales process. the team engulfed themselves with that team as if we were part of it. And that's part of the passion that comes with it. You need to become part of that part of the business, part of the problem, part of the solution. And you need to come in with energy and excitement and not just the math and not just the data.
But it's also how you help sell your end solution, right? As you get the business partnership of creating the relationships with those people and the stakeholders, it helps you to get the buy-in and then drive the actions. If you don't have that relationship with the business, you can create the best model, but if nobody's going to use it, so what's it for?
Excuse me. That makes sense. And that's when you mentioned that drive to action. Joe has talked in some other previous chats, fireside chats, about the comedy improv class, and then we've talked about was kind of buzzworthy data storytelling and the whole connection of these things to driving change, right? And how can we accomplish this? You want to talk a little bit about that? Have you both attended the comedy improv class?
It is a wonderful date night experience that I highly recommend for couples. What do you want to start?
Oh, yeah, we took the class together. So I think it was 10 weeks. And it was really interesting and valuable. Definitely recommend it. I myself tend to be a more introverted person by nature. So it's nice to kind of help push you out of your comfort zone in that perspective. It helps you think about things in different way and also sometimes not think as much and just do. But from a work perspective, I think as you get more senior and you're in meetings with, executives, they might throw curveballs at you and you have to be prepared. So I think that that was a valuable experience to help prepare for that.
And for those of you that aren't familiar with improv, think whose line is it anyway? So it's the theatrical kind of experience where you're making things up on the spot, potentially with some prompts. And if you think about being in a boardroom or being in a meeting room with a senior stakeholder or maybe an executive, the other thing that improv helps you to do is figure out how to go with the flow. It's all based on this premise of yes and. So if you're presenting something to a stakeholder that you need to influence, you need to convince, you need them to use what you built, and they throw a curveball at you. They have some doubt, they think they know better, they have an example that disproves what you're talking about. You acknowledge what they say and you build from it and you keep the scene going. And improv teaches you the core skills to be able to do that so you don't end up with that kind of deer in the headlights look because they're taking you off script or they brought up something that you didn't prepare for. And in the analytics space, especially when you're driving significant transformation and change and going after core business processes that are going to fundamentally change the way people work, there will be curveball after fireball after asteroid, anything they will throw at you. Trust me, they are going to try. It's going to come your way. But you need to be able to dance around it. You need to be able to acknowledge it. You can't shut people down because you lose trust at that point. And improv gives you so many of the skills to be able to do that. And the last thing I'll add with the improv, it will be awkward when you first try. The first couple of weeks, especially if you go to an improv troupe where they require singing, it's awkward. You'll get to the third class, though, out of 10, sometimes 13, and you'll feel much better. The light bulb will go off and you realize that there's a method to the madness here. You just have to trust generously in yourself, trust generously in your teachers and in the improv troupe leaders, and give it a chance and see if it works. And worst case scenario, you get a good laugh out of it and maybe a date night like we did, or 10 date nights in that case. But it's just a way to help prepare you and give you some new tools in your tool belt to really be successful in how you impact change with these projects.
That makes a lot of sense. In sales, people kind of get trained that they have to be, on the ready to deal with the customer responses and to figure out, listen to what they're saying, to how they're thinking, so that you can kind of work with that and massage that message that you're trying to attempt, or incentivize them to think differently, potentially, if you need to. But in IT, you know, as you mentioned, being introverted to a certain extent, it's very common in our field for a lot of us to be more introverted. That might be partly why we're like, okay, what kind of job can I get where I know I have to leave the house, or I don't have to talk to people? The computer is my friend, you know, and the rest of it is like, okay, it's cool, but you know, there's a bit of historically, you know, computer programmers and computer technology folks haven't always been the most extroverted, you know, in history. And then also we're so accustomed to being the ones giving the answers. So we might not be as accustomed to learning how to listen, you know, and that's very common with people's experience in IT. So I love how all these things tie together. Do you have any specific example of where you've been able to use your improv class or data storytelling in one of your jobs? Like you kind of covered that, but anything very specific where you maybe were able to impact change effectively that way?
Maybe I'll kick off with this one. There's one example I love to give because I just really enjoyed it. So one of the projects I worked on at Dell was using machine learning to recommend sales quotas. So think about that for a second. So using what for all purposes is a black box to tell a salesperson this is their goal for a particular point in time, and whether or not they hit that goal that the ML model derived will dictate how much they get paid and whether or not they can pay their mortgage, put food on the table, send their kids to daycare, whatever it is that really impacts their livelihood. And that was a big change because sales quotas were really set by sales leaders and through their experience, their gut feelings, and any math that they were trying to do based on their personal experience. And we standardized that process across the globe and then used ML to be able to make those recommendations in a very accurate way. Now, going in front of a large sales force, and Dell had at the time over 27,000 salespeople, and saying, oh, by the way, we're going to use this black box thing to set your quotas going forward, that wouldn't have gone as well. So we tried to think about how could we tell that story in a different way, which is really what improv sometimes do with these prompts. And we ended up telling this story like Super Mario Brothers. And this was before the Super Mario Brothers movie, by the way, which if you haven't seen, I highly recommend. We wanted to go in and explain machine learning like you were trying to learn a new level of Mario. So you start at the beginning, you play through, oh, maybe you fall down a hole, maybe you get eaten by one of those flowers that spit fireballs, you know, something, all these different things that would prevent you to getting to the end. And whether it would take you a night or a weekend or a month or a year to be able to get through it, that basically represents recursive learning. It's trial and error, right? You're learning how to get through, you're getting faster as you do it, and you're getting better, which is really what machine learning is trying to do, is it's trying to calibrate to the patterns within your data set. So there was a lot of parallels between the recursive nature of playing a video game, a nostalgic video game that everyone could relate to, and being able to explain what the machine learning model was actually trying to do. And that made it a lot more approachable. It made it not this scary black box thing. And folks started thinking about it in terms of, okay, well, if you ate the mushroom as Mario, which made you big, it gave you more success to get through the level faster and get more points. Okay. Well, there are also certain drivers that result in higher quotas. There are certain drivers that result in lower quotas, and certain combination of those things are going to give you a certain recommendation that we think you'll be more or less likely to getting to. So we actually designed the PowerPoint slides to look like Super Mario Brothers too. So we went full blown on this, and it was hugely successful because we didn't get in front of this team to talk about a complex math formula, to talk about complex data. We got in there to talk about something that was going to speak to them from a human level, and something, again, that was nostalgic. And a lot of the reason why we came to it from that perspective is because we were thinking about it from a different seed, a different angle. And that angle was, how can we explain this in a way that's untraditional or unexpected?
That sounds awesome. That's neat to be able to really drive it home to that point. I've got some friends who are obsessed with Mario Brothers, by the
That
way.
was my favorite presentation to give, by the way, too. And I had a chance to give it to most of the sales force. It was just so much fun to give that presentation.
And I could see building the machine learning models in the way and kind of configuring things that way. It's almost like you could say that the overfitting problem happens with people's dictating and the machine learning process can overcome that. It's a kind of an interesting twist on things when people worry about that and the development of it and how it ties together.
Well, so if you take the Mario example and say, for example, you memorize the combinations of moves and you're playing the level blindfolded at that point. This is where you can compare to overfitting. If you now go to level 2 and try to do the exact same combination of moves, how successful do you think you're going to be? You're not going to, unless it's a twin level, you're not going to be very successful, right?
That's about how I play. That's
But it's the same
My-
premise. It's the same
my
premise
skill
for overfitting, because you overtrained on data that was way too specific to one outcome, to one set of circumstances. Now, if you're in general trying to think about, okay, well, if I jump every 3 moves or every 5 moves, and you're trying to generalize and generalize and generalize, you'll have higher and higher success of moving into that next level and getting through. So there's all kinds of parallels that you could make between Super Mario Brothers, apparently, and machine learning. But the point is here, it's thinking out of the box. It's trying to tell a story in a very different way, in a way that is going to resonate with your audience that may not be as excited about math as you.
Thank you. I'm going to have that theme.
I can tell.
It's going right now. If we have another moment, I'd like to ask you a little bit about your decision management focus. You put out a great video recently, gave a great talk on decision information workflows, decision management, tied change management into it. And if your focus there and how it ties into the transformational efforts would be a great thing.
So for any of you that haven't seen, so I was at the Open Data Science Conference a couple of weeks ago, and I gave a keynote as part of the ML operations track talking about decision intelligence. And really, if I was going to boil it down to, where the biggest punch is, it's the fact that AI and ML are one element within a larger decision ecosystem. And a lot of times when you come out of programs, when you first get into analytics, sometimes when you've been working in analytics for a while, you sometimes forget the reality that the AI and ML is not the sun in that universe. It's one piece in that universe, and the entire solar system is a decision-making process, which has many business processes. There are many different considerations that are built into it, many different people, many different ways of working. And you need to be able to not only influence potentially one person, but a team or an organization or a workflow. And when you start stepping back and looking at the entire solar system there, the entire ecosystem of a decision, you realize that there's a lot more to do than just collect data, just wrangle and clean that data, just more than building a particular model. You have to bring process engineering in to look at those business flows that are there. You may have to re-engineer those processes. There's a change management aspect to this, because anytime you try to change the way people work, change management is going to be a key player in that story as it plays out. And of course, yeah, there's the AI and ML, but it may actually look a little different if you kind of lay things out the way I do in the keynote, which is looking at the process first, understanding what you need to influence, and then going into, okay, well, what type of AI and ML may make sense given what I need to produce here, what I need to influence, which decision path I need to redirect or potentially move a rock from. And it's just a way of turning things a little bit sideways, really putting the decision maker and your end user at the center of that universe, and trying to do something that works in harmony with the way that they work and what they're going to do when they get up in the morning, and what they're going to do throughout the course of the day. And that's when you really start to see the role of an advanced analytics practitioner and data scientist becoming a business partner. And I think I even made in my keynote at ODSC the comment that the most successful day for me when I was a practitioner within corporate was when I would hear from people that when they thought of me, they thought about me as a business partner. It was not as a data science leader. It was not as an analytics leader. It was not as a change agent or any of these things. It was as a partner. And the reason I was able to establish that brand is because I looked at decision intelligence in the ecosystem that it creates. And I'm sure over the course of the roles that you've been in too, you've come across similar things.
Yes, definitely. Business partnership, as we mentioned earlier, is key to driving any change, and change management has been critical in all of the projects that we work on, not only in my data science projects, but also in my talent product manager role, which is not, a traditional data science role, but still leveraging many of the skills that I learned in data analytics.
That makes sense. I think about how in order for a business partner, in order for these other people in the business to really help drive change instead of help resist it, they tend to if they have some sort of feeling of ownership in the process, so that would be a partnership kind of thing. That always makes the world of difference, because then you have that sponsor, and when you have multiple sponsors involved, then it really, because they're actually actively figuring out how can we use this and improve this, and then it takes some of the weight off of you too, because you've got more ideas coming in from even outside the team. So there's pros and cons to all that, but I think it was Kimball's, is it Kimball's, right? The old data warehouse book, the old Bible, Kimball's. They talk a lot about that, about the process of getting not just one sponsor but multiple. And so usually if you're a partner and building that partnership, I can see. So it's kind of neat how that ties together, and then with your change management process. I'd like to talk about, since we started with the origin story, I'd like to move fast forward to the future and ask you both what kind of change you envision for the industry, or what you're most excited about as far as emerging trends, whatever you'd like to speak to.
Sure, I could start. I think where things are going, at least from what I see in the tech space, is a lot more automation of the roles that exist today. And so what I think that means is they're going to need people who can do the work to automate different business processes, and that will require all the things that we've been talking about, with getting in, understanding the processes, and then understanding what's the optimal way to automate those things, in order to truly change over from people doing the work to AI doing the work. And then also you need people on the other end to consume that, the knowledge workers, to interpret it, to use it. And that's where some of the soft skills come in too, which is like the communication and the change management, and being able to understand what are the insights and how to action them.
I think this is a great time to be excited about being in analytics, or excited about analytics. I will tell you that over the last decade, analytics has not been talked about as much as it is now. Like ChatGPT was great for that. Everybody and their mother and their brother is talking about analytics, which is a great day for all of us. But it also is a challenge, right? Basic tasks, to Amanda's point, are going to be automated. They're already being automated. But where we can come in, and where we can really be of value to corporations and organizations and other institutions, is in that higher order thinking. It's how do you transform the business? It's the process engineering aspects. It's those softer skills, to Amanda's point. It's being able to show how, when, where, and why you're doing certain things. So being able to work and be that partner, understanding how you're going to help the business to do these things. That's really where a lot of the focus is going to be, which means it's not just the data and just the math, but really thinking about what is going to be the most effective way to use this gold nugget that I found in the data, or to use this prediction, which in my training and testing has great accuracy. And how can I work with HR or people in talent, or whatever your HR organization is called, to challenge some of the assumptions around what job profiles exist, what skills different role profiles need, and fundamentally change the way people work. And that's still all within the analytics umbrella. In fact, it's always been there. And one of my biggest frustrations is so many advanced analytics teams and data science teams do such amazing things. They build amazing algorithms. They found they find the meaning of life in data. Let's go with an extreme example there. But they have no idea how to actually affect change with that and execute on it. And this goes back to a point that Amanda was making earlier on successful analytics people knowing how to execute. And the way that you know how to execute is you know how to work in harmony with the business or get the business to recalibrate, redesign what it needs to consume it. It's not just about sending an email with an Excel file or building this wonderful thing called a dashboard. And, I almost feel like it's an Oprah moment where you can say, you get a dashboard and you get a dashboard and everyone gets a dashboard. I believe in surgical usage of dashboards, but there should never be more than 2 or 3 for an entire organization, in my opinion. Instead, you should be thinking about how to take specific insights and put it in the hands of the right person at the right time. And that's where this decision intelligence concept comes back in. So if I think about the trends, in addition to the knowledge worker having a more prevalent place and really bringing in a lot of those soft skills as well, and the process engineering and the change management, I think there's a real opportunity for decision intelligence. And I wouldn't be surprised if a lot of data science organizations start rebranding themselves as decision intelligence over the next 5-6 years. And I just want to say that my team at Dell branded ourselves as decision intelligence before it became cool. But it's that human behavior, it's the psych component. And I think that's going to be a very natural evolution that you're going to see in the space. And the opportunity for us here at WGU, for example, is how we can respond to that and start developing courses and tracks and degree programs to be able to support decision intelligence. And that is something that we're thinking about right now actively.
Seen already some of the different WGU programs that have involved in the various degrees. So quite a difference in some of them. Like the cloud computing one had changed dramatically in the past couple of years. So, and it went directly toward focusing more on the current, industry needs. So it'll be interesting to see how the data analytics and data management program evolves as time goes on. I think it's a fabulous program myself.
Well, actually, if I could interject then for a second, you've had the fun of putting us in the hot seat for the last, 40 minutes or so. I'd love to hear a little bit about your experience, if you don't mind me taking back the interviewer hat for a second here, Alicia.
It's mine.
So,
yeah, no.
So I'd love, so you're a BSD MDA student, so you're an undergraduate student in analytics here in WGU, and you're right at the end. I think you just have your capstone left, right? So do you want to just tell the folks that are listening a little bit about why you came to WGU and what your experience has been?
Absolutely. Well, I'm going to start real quick with my experience to tell you that I did not know what the word overfitting meant a year ago.
Mario, you're just going to use Mario to explain that.
Right? I knew what Mario was, and so the transformation in terms of my knowledge and experience and confidence level is from here to here. So it's quite different. Now, I had a lot of background in business. I'm 47 years old. I'm not starting, straight out of high school or anything. I had a lot of different college courses behind me. I was just building up those basic certificates and things like that. Change management, I got like 3 years ago, various things. But I ended up going through a personal journey myself about 5 or 6 years ago, where I kind of went to find myself. The kids were grown, and they actually, my son actually graduated the December from his bachelor's degree program before I started my February start date, back when I started at WGU. So he was my youngest, and my daughter is, also was graduated about a year or so before that, because there's about 3 years difference between them, a couple of years. And she's a math teacher, and he's a aspiring data scientist, actually, that's just joining the WGU.
Great combination.
Yes. Yeah. So, but I actually, speaking of the history, and you talked about your marketing background and your statistician thing, my background had a lot of web analytics in it. So I have managed a business on the side, and sometimes primarily since 2009, where I was building websites and doing digital marketing, and a ton of, I had a lot of clients for a while there. And I would always have to provide them with the web analytic reports, explain what they meant. My whole process of digital marketing has been always more focused on the SEO side and the factors involved and things like that. So basically, it was kind of a natural progression for me. I was trying to decide when I finally went through that changing time in my life where I decided that I was going to stop letting environments and experience and people define my choice architecture. At that point is when I said, I can do this. And so first I actually finished the Google IT support program. I was already working at Genesis at the time in the IT team. And as an analyst, so as analyst, data analytics, I was working over the document management, planning for the company kind of thing. And it only recently was promoted to IT architect. But it all kind of tied together so very well. Thank you. And it's helped me every step of the way. Every course I've taken to WGU has been helping me on my job too. And it's just that it's that circular process of connecting all those dots and growing those skills. So I had coded before. I worked as a software engineer at United Airlines years ago for a little bit. I wasn't good at it, but I did it. So all these different pieces, I wanted to fill those gaps. So it's been a great experience for me.
That's awesome. Well, I'm thrilled that you came here to join us, and I'm thrilled that you're so close to crossing that finish line. And maybe at some point we'll see you in the master's program as well. And just a quick heads up to the folks that are listening, we're going to jump into Q&A in just a minute as well. So if you want to get a question out there for Amanda or myself or Alicia, you have an opportunity to do that in the bottom right-hand corner of the screen. In fact, I think there's only one question in there right now. So feel free to type away anything that's on your mind. So Alicia, one final question for you, and then I have one for Amanda. Yes, it's coming back. Any recommendations that you would have, tips or tricks that you would have to folks that are considering coming into the BSD-MDA as they think about coming into the program? Maybe they're on the fence. Any words of wisdom to give?
For me, it was just recognizing that I could do it, taking that action, and the mentor part really does help, because if you feel like it might be a struggle sometimes, or if you're like me and you've started a lot of things and didn't finish them, that mentor process really helps dramatically. And I just would say, don't be afraid, because in reality, there's a lot of safety nets, let's say, through the process. If you hit a subject that you're just really completely unfamiliar with, or you don't know how I would ever be able to figure that out, the instructors will get in and work with you hands-on very heavily. And I know that a lot of colleges don't have that scenario where you can't quite get as easily so much instructor support. There's various support networks in all colleges, I would hope, but it's just very it's very easy. And in every single course you join, you have an assigned instructor, you have an instructor group. So if your assigned instructor isn't as fast as you want, you can pester the instructor group and they will respond to you. And it's all on you, really, because you can get what you want out of it, but you have to just reach out. And so if you're willing to just take that step and say, hey, I need this help, then you get the help and you get through stuff that you didn't know that you could necessarily do. Some of us might not be as good at math and think, oh, I'm scared of that. I've had times where I wasn't as comfortable with math. My two kids are brilliant at math. My daughter being a math teacher, my son, it was easy. But so I had to learn some things that they already knew. But you just have to take it bit by bit, and it's a really neat experience, and it can open up doors.
Just think about how exciting your Thanksgiving is going to be once everyone's in the math and analytics field in your family. Very exciting Thanksgiving there. So again, thank you very much, Alicia. We're going to have to get you on the open house series to talk about the program, by the way. I loved everything that you said. And I do have one question for Amanda too. So when we were chatting earlier, we were talking about ways to prepare to be in this field, to be in analytics. And we were talking about Dr. Google, for example. What advice do you have for the folks that are thinking about going into the analytics domain professionally? And why don't you tell them a little bit about what we mean by Dr. Google?
Nobody expects you to know everything. It's not possible when you go into one of these roles. But your best friend needs to be Google. And when you run into those challenges and you don't know how to do something, whether it's a new type of code or a different algorithm that you haven't learned before, use Google, look it up. That should always be your first step. Having other people around you that you can ask for help is great too, but you don't want to annoy them with too many questions. So I always recommend using Google as your first step. And you'll be able to find things in a coding realm like Stack Overflow. Honestly, sometimes I still use it for Excel. There's just so much information out there. So I use that as an interview question personally, because if I find somebody who if I ask somebody, you know, are if you run into something that you don't know, what steps would you take? And they either don't know or they would go ask somebody, like that tells me a lot. So
That's that deer in the headlights moment. They need improv is what they need.
yeah.
But it's all about it's about being resourceful, right?
Yeah.
Like as you're coming across new business problems or you're switching between languages. So my data science teams at Dell, for example, were language agnostic. If a business problem needed a particular solution and that solution was best served in R, then you used R.
Mhm.
If it was best served in Python, you used Python.
Mhm.
If you had to custom develop something, you used Java.
Mhm.
If you needed to use Perl, you used Perl. Like it was really about what you needed. And nobody on the team was an expert to me at this point in
Yeah.
everything, but everyone on the team was resourceful.
Yeah.
And now, granted, when you're on Dr. Google, you also have to take everything with a grain of salt. You're going to have to do some testing and validation, right?
Mhm.
It's Wikipedia at large scale, so you got to be careful. But that notion of self-resiliency, maybe reaching out to a former instructor or professor for advice, reaching back out to some classmates or colleague, really building your network. You need to figure out how to get yourself out of the hole is really what it comes down to. So Alicia, Amanda, I know that we're getting somewhat close in time and we see some questions coming in. Should we dive into the Q&A?
Good.
Well, I have a couple questions that I'm seeing in here that are great. I think this one will go to Joe. Is decision intelligence part of the current MSDA curriculum?
I would love it to be. So there are elements that are in there today around working with stakeholders, end users, the data product life cycle, right? So that whole notion of a life cycle and looking at those projects as a process, as a life cycle in itself, understanding the storytelling aspect, pulling things together in the capstone. There are many elements of decision intelligence that are in both programs, the undergrad and the master's today. I'd like to get a little bit more prescriptive in folks that are actually going after job titles in decision intelligence. So decision scientist and decision engineer. And that's going to require some additional research and development into particular tracks in an upcoming version of the program. So we're in the process of doing market research right now, working with our advisory councils and understanding as the rise of the decision engineer and decision scientist really start to populate quite a bit. What skills do they need? I know from my experience, there's a psych and behavioral science component to it. There's a change management component to it. There's a systems architecture component to it. Likely an improv. And if I can get my way, there'll be an official improv class, perhaps within the curriculum. But we're validating that right now with our industry peers. I'm going to be at an industry event tomorrow in Boston with a bunch of chief data analytics officers. And I'm going to go in with that question, asking all about decision intelligence and who they're going to be looking to hire. So I think over the next couple of years, you'll see a more and more calibrated focus towards that in a track format, but more to come. And in the meantime, there are critical components of decision intelligence that are already surgically inserted into both programs in the existing curriculum.
Fantastic. One of the biggest questions that's always asked is, what level of mathematics does a potential data analytics professional need to be successful in this business? I think that's a great question for all three of you.
Maybe I can set the stage and then they can build on it.
Mhm.
It depends.
Mhm.
It depends on the role. Analytics is a very large umbrella.
Yeah. I would agree with that. Probably some basic statistics is a good foundation, but it depends what type of analytics job you want to go into. I think between the three of us, you've heard about a lot of different potential roles that use data analytics. So, you may have heavier foundation of math with it, like data science or machine learning engineer role. But there are certainly quite a few that you could have with the more basic math.
Well, a lot of it, I guess, comes down to also what you're passionate about. So if you love math, you can find a role in the analytics umbrella that uses a lot of math.
Yeah.
If you think back to the fireside chat I did with Dr. Ken Zhang a few weeks back, or maybe a couple of months ago at this point, he leads at Morgan Stanley a data science research team. They are using a lot more math in that versus somebody that may be looking to do self-service BI, perhaps, which is still fall under the analytics umbrella. Or maybe it's somebody like Will Alden, who was on the panel that we had a couple of episodes back, where Will was talking about his role as a business engagement lead, as a business partner within a data science team. His role is more to interface with stakeholders versus being hands on keyboard and doing some of the more advanced math. So a lot of it comes down to what personally matters to you. Now, the great thing about our programs is you're going to get the foundation you need to springboard into any of those roles. At that point, depending on what you want to do in the master's or where you may want to get a PhD at some point or some other certifications, you can start to kind of make your own destiny here in a lot of ways. If you want to go math heavy and end up on a data science research team, there are paths for that. If you want to get the understanding of math, get the basics, understand what it's capable of doing, and then let somebody else worry about it, there are paths for that too.
Excuse me, I want to add that, if you're in an analytics role where you're doing Power BI and Tableau and various things, or if you're in a scenario where you're plugging data in and you're getting visualizations out, and you're looking at the size of the bar charts and various things like that, there are lots of scenarios where you don't actually have to be brilliant at math, but you can certainly identify what's going on. I think that it's a drive toward increasing your logic skills and analysis. So you might be math might come naturally to you, or you might be scared of it. And there's certainly statistics involved, but there's help through that process if you're scared of it. So.
Fantastic. If someone is wanting to improve their communication skills for business, do you have any recommendations on college level courses that they could take?
Well, that's an interesting one. So within our programs today, we have communication courses that exist, especially in the undergrad course, the undergrad program in particular. If you're looking to go out and do more in that space at some of the community colleges as well, you can look at creative writing courses. It's a great way to do it, to really get your voice out there. We're in the process now of developing a storytelling course, which I think will be fantastic when that launches. There's improv again, so actually going up and finding a local improv troupe to sign up for. I highly recommend that. Toastmasters is another option, another organization that you'll see quite a bit. I don't know, Amanda or Alicia, if you want to add anything to that. I think there's a wide variety of ways that you can look at communications. It really comes down to what you're comfortable with and what you're willing to try.
Yeah, I mean, it depends on the type of communication too, right? Because if you're interested in verbal communication, there might be areas in your normal life where you can get involved in different like school committees or things like that, where you might be asked to go in front of a group and speak about something. It doesn't have to be business oriented just to get comfortable being in front of a room of people. Or email communications. There are specific courses that are more targeted towards that, or PowerPoint slides and storytelling through PowerPoints. I don't have any specific ones in mind, but think about what is the area that you want to focus on, and look for something targeted to that.
There is actually a communications course too, as part of the data analytics and data management course, so that can be helpful.
Great. The last question I think we have time for. This is going to take it a little more personal, down to your family level. Since data analysts really like puzzles and putting things together, do you guys have a lot of family puzzle nights in your house?
We do some. We do some puzzles. We do a lot of games. Yeah, we like playing games with
Strategy
kids.
games. Yeah. There's one in particular called Bonanza. I highly recommend, otherwise known as the Bean Game. If you go on Amazon and look up Bonanza, you'll know why we're calling it the Bean Game. But there are things around anticipation, trying to understand what other folks are going to do. So there's a human behavior element of it. There's a negotiation aspect to it and strategy. And a lot of that plays to the roles that we have now. In analytics, you're negotiating, you're being a salesperson, you're trying to anticipate those behaviors. That's that decision intelligence piece again. And a lot of these games that you will find in the Dery household very much tie back to those themes. And in addition, our 4-year-old is currently into Mario Kart as well. So there's that Mario theme that keeps on emerging everywhere in my life. Anything else, Jory?
I just had a couple more questions pop in. Someone's brand new to the data science field. They enjoy research, but they're not sure that they want to work in the financial arena or HR. What other career paths do they have options to go into?
In research,
They want to do data science research, or they've done it and now they're trying to figure out what industries or fields they can go into.
It looks like they're not really interested in those two fields, so looking
Okay.
at what alternative career paths there are.
there's always academic research, and then I've heard there's some in healthcare. We know some people who are in data science research in the healthcare field.
I think you're going to find it.
Pretty much everywhere.
Yeah. So, for example, I started out with a marketing focus, and in my career, I've actually never worked in marketing. I worked in sales, I worked in finance, and I worked in supply chain. Amanda's been in sales, and she's been in health. What do you call Virgin Pulse?
Well,
Wellness.
Yeah, health. Yeah, wellness. I guess.
Wellness, and then back in HR.
Mm-hmm.
You'll find everywhere within an organization there's analytics or a need for it. And actually, it's an exciting time because if you're going into some of these other departments, there's a lot of borrowing between two, which creates for a lot of really interesting projects. So if you did something in supply chain, how might you apply it in sales? Or, here within WGU, so internal, not within the academics, but internal to the university, I'm starting to try to bring some of the concepts that we use at Dell within the supply chain at Dell to actually help improve and drive efficiencies here at WGU. So the great thing about analytics is it really does generalize. Well, it's great to get the business acumen to help you in particular projects and to build relationships. It's so transferable.
Mm-hmm.
My transition into these different pillars was not that difficult. Yes, you had to rebuild networks. Yes, you had to learn the business acumen. But the way that you're thinking about the problems, the way that you're using data, the way you're using math, the way you're thinking about that larger decision ecosystem, it's not that different. There's a lot that you can transfer, and your experience in those other pillars is very valuable.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I completely agree with that. I wouldn't have been able to make my transition to so many different types of roles within different organizations without that transferable mindset and just the intellectual curiosity to learn whatever is specific to that business area.
So, Alicia, I think that's it. I think we're out of time.
Well, I just guess I'll thank everyone for coming tonight. It was very enjoyable. Thank you to our guests as well, the Dery family. And
Alicia, thank you very much. Really appreciate you taking the time from your studies and from life to spend the evening with us, and for everyone on the phone jumping in and spending the evening with us. Thank you. We're going to go do a puzzle now. So
bye-bye.
Bye.
have a great night, everyone.